The views expressed are solely those of the speaker and not necessarily those of Paltalk.com, AVM software, or its advertisers.
News Talk is online. News Talk Online is a production of Paltalk.com, the largest multimedia interactive program on the internet with more than 4 million unique users on demand on iTunes and on YouTube and on my blog, GaryBaumgarten.com, where you are encouraged to post your comments, whether they agree with what I've written or not. And thanks to our good friends at CRN Digital Talk Radio, we're syndicated across the United States into 12 million additional households. I am your host, Gary Baumgarten. Welcome to this very special edition of News Talk Online on Paltalk.com. For those of you who were with us earlier in Paltalk Studio B, you know that we were providing for you live, uninterrupted coverage without commentary and with dignity. The memorial service on today, the 7th anniversary of the attacks of 9/11/2001 at Ground Zero, right near our studio here in Lower Manhattan. And we now, as we always do on the anniversary, remember that day with our guests. We're going to start with two guests. On the phone, joining me is Dr. Roger Yurt. He's the chief of the burn surgery unit at New York Presbyterian Hospital. On September the 11th, Dr. Yurt treated but a handful of burn patients, but found that far more people were suffering from respiratory problems. And to my right, your left, is FDNY paramedic Joey Hudak, a former instructor at the Fire Academy who responded to the World Trade Center on September the 11th, was there actually, I believe, when they found the chief of the department.
Yes, there's down there.
Okay, your voice is much lower than mine, so we're going to have to ask you to speak up a little louder. Thank you, Joey. Let's start with you, Dr. Yurt. Welcome to News Talk Online on Paltalk.com.
Thank you.
Now, I know you were in New Jersey when the towers were hit, and you immediately responded to the burn unit here on Manhattan, anticipating. And I got to tell you, one of the images that we don't really see a lot of, but for me really were telling, was when I went by St. Vincent's Hospital, for example, and I saw everybody triage unit out there. Half the hospital was lined up. They were ready for mass casualties, and no casualties, relatively speaking, came in because pretty much all the people who were victims, unfortunately, were dead. And one would have thought that that would have been the beginning and the end of the medical emergency involving September the 11th, 2001, but it's not. Here we are 7 years later, Dr. Yurt, and we are still learning that there are so many people who lived and worked in the area, visiting the area, and more importantly, I guess, because of their exposure more prolonged to the toxins on the pile, the rescue and recovery workers who responded on September 11th and September the 12th and October the 12th and November the 12th and December the 12th, they're suffering respiratory problems now. And so I guess while in the beginning the story was, one of the stories were there weren't very many people injured as a result of what happened, we're now finding out that's not really the case.
Well, our care here at the burn center was primarily, and still is primarily, for burn patients. We received 18 patients initially, and then another 4 over the following couple of days. Those people had the combination of inhalation injury, which is secondary to smoke, and inhalation of jet fuel, as well as burns.
And so I guess you were probably surprised that there were only 18 and then 4 patients, given obviously the intensity of this event, the biggest fire that ever occurred in New York City and probably across the United States of America.
You're right. We were fairly busy at the time. We had 38 of our 40 beds full, but within about an hour we emptied out by redistributing patients 30 beds, and we're planning to try to open up as many as about 50, and it's turned out we didn't need anywhere near that many beds.
Yes, exactly. Are there lessons to be learned about the response to mass casualty incidents as a result of what happened here on September the 11th, 2001? Have we learned anything? Are we better prepared now in that regard than we were then?
Well, we are, and actually there's been quite a bit of activity both on our part as well as on the part of the city over the last 7 years in devising better ways of dealing with this type of situation. No matter what you do, there are going to be a certain number of patients who are going to be distributed outside of organized EMS and medicine. So we're planning that a good number of patients may end up someplace where they need to be moved secondarily. And part of that process is to train and designate centers to be able to at least take care of some of the casualties, if there really are hundreds or thousands, on a temporary basis before we can get them to what we consider definitive care.
And is your center the primary receiver of burn victims in New York City?
Well, there are 4 state-recognized burn centers in the city, but we are the largest and the busiest burn center.
And I just want to, I know your specialty is the burns, but I just want to come back to, because obviously people who have burns, most of them are going to also have respiratory issues. Are those respiratory issues more chronic now for those individuals than, in other words, are you treating people more so for the respiratory issues of the 18 and 4 or more for the residual effects of the burn?
I would say something like 10% of the patients have ongoing respiratory problems, and the rest of them are primarily burn problems. I'm not, I'm not a specialist with the types of lung injury that people are talking about from breathing in products in the air down at the time beyond that time. I think that probably is something different than breathing in the products of combustion that we see from a fire.
And I know